Right, good evening everybody. Could we start with apologies for absence?
Chairman, we have apology from Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Jonathan Bianco.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in matters before us this evening? None. In which case, can we approve the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting on pages 1 to 12 of the agenda?
Agreed.
Thank you. Just to confirm that items of business marked Part 1 will be considered in public and items of business marked Part 2 will be in private. The Cabinet reports in Part 1 are reports 5 to 9 and reports 10 to 11 are the Part 2 reports which will be held in private. So the first report before us this evening, agenda item 5, page 13, a review by the Corporate Services, Commerce and Communities Policy Overview Committee, combating homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying of young people in Hillingdon. Could I call Councillor Richard Mills to present this report?
Thank you, Leader. Hillingdon Council remains committed to defending our residents against all forms of bullying and promoting equality across our borough. This particular review, which was initiated by the previous Corporate Services and Partnerships POC and finalised by my committee, focused on tackling bullying against our younger LGBT population at school, so both they and the schools alike can feel more supported. It is estimated that 5 to 7% of the British population now identify as LGBT, which means roughly 5,000 of Hillingdon's younger residents are also LGBT. Following a national young person survey by Stonewall in 2017, members of the committee heard that half of the LGBT pupils and 2/3 of trans pupils are bullied at school, and of these pupils, almost half never have the confidence to tell anyone about this situation of being bullied. Furthermore, the committee learned a number of alarming statistics, including that 40% of LGBT students had skipped school because of bullying, and over half of those bullied reported that this had a negative effect on their future plans for education. Large numbers admitted considering or actually carrying out self-harm, with a worrying number having considered committing suicide. The committee found these statistics and the findings very distressful, and through broader evidence received, it became clear to members that more action and cooperative work was required to tackle this issue. The committee heard from witnesses including council officers, teachers, schools, equality charities, but most importantly, young LGBT residents themselves who had personally been affected and victims of bullying. And these powerful testimonies inspired the recommendations that we bring before you tonight. The effect of homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying on young people is clearly worrying, and it is the committee's hope that the recommendations before you can empower schools further to support their young LGBT pupils who suffer bullying, while also helping to tackle the causes and effects of this, demonstrating that such intolerance will not be tolerated within Hillingdon. I therefore commend the committee's report and our recommendations to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. Councillor Simmons.
Well, thank you, Councillor Mills, and I'm sure you could take the thanks of Cabinet back to your colleagues. This is a very good piece of work. I think, as you've noted, it follows on from previous work in this area, which has been undertaken by past policy overview committees. I think what's very striking about it is that it's an issue which, however much we think progress is being made, the lived experience day to day of a large proportion of our residents is different, and therefore the need both to be vigilant in general terms, but also to be thinking ahead about policy developments, how we support schools, teachers, families to deal with the issues that are highlighted in here is extremely valuable. I think the fact in particular that you took direct testimony and then have used that to inform the policy recommendations is particularly helpful. So I would commend to Cabinet colleagues that we endorse both the recommendations and the recommendations of the POC that are outlined at 1 to 5, and I suspect it's an issue which we'd want to return to in due course once we've had the opportunity, as was the case with the previous 2013 review, to see the impact of the recommendations, the policy changes that follow, and what the consequences of those, hopefully positive, but what the consequences of those things are for our residents and what we might need to do differently thereafter. So I move those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Again, could I reiterate those thanks, Councillor Mills, that you take thanks to Cabinet, back to your committee for the job well done. Thank you. Agenda item 6, page 73, Statement of Gambling Policy Consultation. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Leader. I want to move the recommendations at the top of page 74. It's 3 years since Council adopted our existing gambling policy in line with the legislation. And during that time, there's been a number of changes to even the department responsible at national government for this, as well as changes to data protection and what have you. So it was appropriate that we needed to review this particular policy. So we have to go out to consultation because it's one of those which needs to go to consultation, come back, and then go to full council for ratification. But page 77 highlights that we're not talking about a fundamental change, really a tidying up exercise. But the consultation, of course, does give the opportunity for people to suggest if there's anything fundamentally wrong with the policy that we've had in place since 2016. So really an administrative exercise after 3 years, but one in which we would welcome any interesting comments to give consideration as to whether the policy is actually achieving what we require in Hillingdon. And I move the recommendations.
Are those recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 7, page 135, Dynamic Purchasing System for Homecare and Outreach Services. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Leader. I move the report and recommendation to extend the dynamic purchasing system for home care and outreach services for 6 months as per the report. It is worth saying something, I think, about the underlying approach to this. In a challenging marketplace, there is value, I think, in reducing the complexities associated with managing a large number of providers, which we're in a better position to do now we've developed strong relationships with key providers. Our thinking is around having 3 main home care and outreach providers in different geographical areas, enabling us to reduce the number of spot providers and to better manage price and quality, and of course safeguarding. It also means that we can have a stronger partnership-based relationship with providers in the future. Apart from this, the Clinical Commissioning Group separately commissions services for continuing healthcare patients. Providers are often the same, which can result in fragmentation and cherry-picking of cases. And with Hillingdon brokering for the CCG as part of this, we can eradicate this practice moving forward. So all of this really represents, I think, bringing the commissioning of these services together in a coherent and consistent manner that is cost-effective, built-in quality for our residents across social care and health. And with that, I commend the report and recommendation to Cabinet. Thank you.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, page 141, and there is an addendum sheet that you should all have, which refers to this particular report and report 10. I'll come to the addendum when we move to the recommendations. This is the Council Budget 2018-19 Revenue and Capital Outturn, the finalisation of our accounts for the year to 31st of March 2019. And as the headlines show, we have come in under budget to the tune of £2.249 million, which is a not insubstantial sum. Not quite as good as the £2.5 million we were under last year, or the 3.9 we were under the year before, but still a significant achievement which would be well received by any council up and down the land. If we left it at that, we would go into the new year with general balances of £41,620,000, but there are a couple of little tweaks we will make at the year end, which will leave our balances carried forward at £40,344,000, which again is not an inconsiderable amount. We also have earmarked reserves to cover all sorts of other contingencies. So, looking at the recommendations, and there are quite a few because it is the outturn, the first is that we note the budget position, the March outturn, and the in-year release of the development and risk contingency funds. These are the funds that we set aside at the beginning of the year for potential risks or contingency actions, and we allocate it during the year and at the year end, which we will do tonight as is required. Those details are on page 149 for the benefit of scrutiny if you want to look at it in table 5. I referred earlier to utilising some of the surplus that we've got, the overachievement in our budget performance, and what we are proposing to do is £776,000 worth of unspent priority growth funds will be earmarked for continuing priority growth initiatives, and we will continue to hold that to one side for anything that we consider requires priority growth. A further £500,000 will be added to the Heathrow expansion legal challenge, and back Heathrow can make what they like of that. And for the avoidance of doubt, that will bring the fighting fund up to £897,000, which they'll be even more pleased about. I don't anticipate at this stage that we'll have to spend all of that, but I am extremely confident that the way we are placed now with this, not only the legal challenge that we have at the moment, but with the development consent order and also the pending change in the hierarchy of government, that things are beginning to look pretty bleak as far as Heathrow expansion is concerned. Recommendation 3 is to note the use of capital receipts to fund service transformation. That's set out in Appendix E, and this is the first of the changes on the addendum sheet. It's not D as it says, it's Appendix E, which is on page 180. And if you look at page 180, I'll explain a little what that is. These are bid reviews that we do that produce the savings that we achieve over a number of years. And if you go straight to the bottom right-hand side, you will see that to achieve, hopefully, savings of £32,772,000, it will cost £2.565 million. Now, those figures are, because our transformation figures are capitalised costs, so that is the cost of our business improvement programme this year. Recommendation 4 is to note the Treasury Management Update at March 2019 Outturn, Appendix F, page 181. It's a very detailed report, and I don't intend to go through it, but it's, again, a fairly solid position for us to be in on Treasury Management. Recommendation 5 is to continue to delegate to myself and the Chief Executive the appointment of consultant and agency assignments, which total over £50,000, and they are detailed in Appendix G on page 186. Recommendation 6, and there's one change, and this is on the addendum site as highlighted. The waste disposal levy and associated contracts should read 691K and not 772K as here. But these are, as I referred to earlier on, we're moving these development and risk contingency items into Directors' operating budgets, 6A to E as amended. Recommendation 7 approves the rephasing of the General Fund capital expenditure and the HRA capital expenditure. Each year this moves forward depending on what we have left for particular projects, schools, etc., capital build. And it has a knock-on effect in Recommendation 8 as well, that we move forward some rephasing of the 2019-20 General Fund. The next 3 recommendations are accepting various funding that we do get towards the year end. Special Provision Fund capital grant of 1.356 million from the Department of Education, 40k grant from the Greater London Authority, under the Greener City Fund, Community Grant Scheme, and Transport for London Local Implementation Fund funding of 49k for cycle training in the coming year. We then have recommendation 12, which is to approve various gift funding in relation to planning performance agreements, and they are as detailed for different planning applications and the amounts involved. Agree the Meals on Wheels service adjusts its fees and charges with effect from the 1st of July 2019. New clients will be charged £5.25. This will not impact on current users of the service, whose charge will remain the same. Recommendation 14, to approve the changes to leisure fees and charges as set out in Appendix H. This is page 190, and we do this after the budget setting that we do in February, because of our policy of being cheaper than any of our other surrounding local authorities. We have to wait to see what they're charging before we can set our charges, which means this year the swimming charge for an adult in Hillingdon will go up by 10p, and for a junior by 5p, and various other charges for gym use and whatever, but nothing really major in face charges. And finally 15, and following on from what I said at the council meeting recently, we do have for a number of years doubled the figure that we get from curbside recycling and put it in the Mayor's charity, because we have had a successful year again. We actually would exceed that, and we would double what the Mayor himself achieved and make that the total 96k for the year. So, all in all, a very good year financially, and I'd like to ask the Director of Finance to take our thanks back to his staff for the oversight that they put into this day in, day out. It is what makes us different in Hillingdon. Our ability to manage finance leads us into the ability to do so much for our residents. Are there any further comments? If not, are the recommendations agreed? As amended, are they agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 9, page 193, planning obligations, quarterly financial monitoring report. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Leader. This is our usual monitoring we have for the 106 and 278 agreements. As you will see, the council still holds substantial amounts, and we still get good amounts coming in. Currently, as of the end of March, it was 14.8 million. You'll see that 4.2 we've managed to allocate an earmark for various projects across the borough, and 3.7 relates to funds that the council holds but currently unable to spend directly, which leaves the residual balance shown there of 6.7. Quarter 4, the council has received additional income of 3.1 and spent 2.8 of that already. The council and its officers do still get these very good 106 and 278 agreements, and the officers do need to be commended on the way that this is all put together, because as you will see around the borough, we have a lot of developers wanting to come into this area, a lot of companies wanting to move into this area, and if we agree that there are going to be various constructions going up, we need to protect the residents of Hillingdon through these agreements for infrastructure, GPs, school places, etc. The one caveat I will give is my usual one. Please look at your own portfolios, starting on page 200 onwards, and if there are any queries you've got with anything within those, let myself and officers know, and I will get you the answers as to where we are with those currently. With that said, I move the recommendation that Cabinet notes this current financial information. Thank you, Leader.
Is the recommendation agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We now move to part 2.